The Imperial soldiers stand tall with their spears, mocking a frontier tribe for even trying to fight back against the Empire, and their general just sits on his throne like it's nothing. He tells the survivors they're lucky the Emperor is feeling nice today, and that they better hand over their clan if they want to live. So one of the tribesmen bows down while being told he should be happy to serve. But then the red-haired guy on the floor just glares up at them, even while he's pinned down. He calls them all barbarians and refuses to back down. But suddenly the scene shifts to these two divine-looking people bowing and praying. The old man admits they made a massive mistake, and the girl next to him says they're really sorry, making the guy's soul just stand there looking completely blank. He can't believe what's happening and asks if he's actually dead. Then the old man explains that this is the afterlife. He points out that there was a truck accident, and even though the guy survived, the goddess accidentally grabbed him and brought him there alive anyway. The old man even starts tearing up about it. He says he feels terrible because the guy was so young and still a virgin when he died, which immediately makes the guy snap back that he definitely wasn't a virgin. Since they messed up so bad, the old man just shrugs it off, saying everyone makes mistakes. He tells the guy he can just send him back right now if that's what he wants. The god stops for a second and realizes there might be a problem, so it shows a funerary urn sitting on a table next to some flowers. The god awkwardly points out that the guy has already been cremated, which makes the guy's soul completely freak out. He starts panicking about how he can't go back to his life anymore, but the goddess just yells at him to get it together. She tells him that as an adult, he shouldn't be acting so crazy about the situation. But the guy snaps back that this whole mess is clearly their fault and he can't believe they were so careless. The god holds up his hand to stop the arguing and says he's heard enough, explaining they have a backup plan for emergencies. He tells the guy that since going back home is impossible, he can reincarnate him into a different world instead. The god adds that there's no guarantee it'll be a safe birth and he'll have to take over the body of someone who just died, leaving the guy speechless. The old man says it's their responsibility to fix this mistake and keep him alive, but the guy can only focus on the fact that they're finally apologizing. The guy takes a second to think about the whole reincarnation thing and realizes his old life wasn't even that great. Plus, the fact he already had a funeral makes moving on easier. He finally decides to just go for it and tells them he'll do it, which makes the old god super happy as he tells the guy that's an excellent choice. The guy asks what kind of special skills he's going to get in this new world, and just then the goddess jumps in with a creepy look on her face, asking if she can be his guide since she's always wanted to try it. The guy gets a little weirded out because she seems way too excited about this, but she ignores him and starts listing off powers, like a body made of steel, language skills, and even a smartphone. The god looks pretty confused and asks if a phone isn't a bit random for a world like that. Suddenly, a loud bell starts ringing out of nowhere, catching everyone off guard. The god hears the bell and says the workday is finally over, so they have to stop right now. He mentions to himself that a good work-life balance is pretty important for everyone, and the guy's soul gets super jealous of the god's hours before realizing he still doesn't know what his new life will even be like. He tries to get some answers, but the god just gives a thumbs up and says it's all up to Cho Choi. The goddess joins in with a thumbs up too, promising he'll get some special skills out of it, and the guy shouts that the whole situation is getting way too specific. The god ignores the complaint and just tries to move things along, and before he knows it, the god and goddess are smiling and waving goodbye as they wish him a safe trip. It turns out a weirdly specific mistake by this specific pair led to a very specific new deal for the guy. And just like that, his second life begins. He wakes up covered in bandages and looking pretty beat up, but as he tries to get his bearings, a guy with a mustache sitting next to him calls out the name Gaia. The guy looks totally confused and wonders if Gaia is supposed to be his new name. But then he suddenly starts screaming in pain and clutching his head while the mustache guy yells his name again, clearly worried. Everything starts hitting Gaia at once. A massive wave of info about this new world floods his brain, and his head starts killing him. He wishes that old God had actually warned him about the mental dump. But while the god just laughs in his memory, the mustache guy beside him starts panicking and asking if he's doing okay. Gaia looks over at him, still trying to process his new life and who exactly this guy is supposed to be. Suddenly, a name clicks, and he asks if the man is Uncle Atos, which makes the guy look incredibly relieved. He pulls Gaia into a massive hug, holding him tight while crying and saying how glad he is that Gaia is all right. He's clearly been through a lot, and he tells Gaia that since his brother and sister are already gone, he couldn't handle losing anyone else. Gaia looks down at his own hands, remembering what the god said about taking over a body that just died. It hits him that he's living in a corpse that's still warm, and watching the man cry makes him feel a bit guilty. He wonders if it's even right for him to steal the life of someone who was clearly loved this much. But Uncle Athos interrupts his thoughts. He asks how Gaia is feeling, mentioning that the Empire's soldiers really did a number on him with some pretty nasty wounds. Gaia starts unwrapping the bandages on his arm and suddenly sits up, looking totally shocked at what he sees. He can't believe it because his wounds are literally closing up right in front of him. Athos had just asked if he was okay, but this level of healing is on a whole different level, and he just stares at his skin, sweating a bit as he realizes there's no way he can explain how this is happening. He tries to play it cool though, on holding up the old bandages and telling Athos he's fine since the injuries weren't actually that bad. Athos looks relieved and says he's glad to hear it, but then his face gets serious. He tells Gaia that even though he just woke up, they really need to get moving and asks him straight up if he's actually able to walk. Gaia doesn't hesitate and tells him that of course he can move, so he follows Athos out of the tent. As they walk, Gaia thinks back to that massive info dump from earlier. He's apparently the next in line to lead the Bluemont tribe, and things are pretty rough right now because his people are in the middle of a fight against the Vafankro Empire. As they walk through the camp, another guy spots them and loses it, asking Athos if Gaia's wounds are seriously already healed. Athos checks in on the situation, letting everyone know that Gaia is doing okay now. He even gives a quick thanks for the help in getting a message out to the Emperor because things are getting official. He and Gaia are planning to head over and demand an actual apology for all the mess that just went down. Though Athos is clearly frustrated about it, clenching his fist and wondering if they can even get an apology out of a guy like the Emperor. He knows it's a long shot, but tells Gaia it's just how things have to be since it all goes back to when the Bluemont tribe tried to stand up for themselves. They rebelled against the Empire's total jerk behavior, but unfortunately they ended up losing that fight. Now the man in charge is Emperor Goldius III, who sits on his throne looking like he's got better things to do, and Gaia is honestly floored by the current setup. He asks if their employer, Veratacoris, I was really the one who provided all these supplies, which gets a confident wink from Athos, who gives a big thumbs up and drops even more news. He explains that the Empire is actually going to feed them throughout the whole war, and he even managed to score an advance payment. Gaia can't believe they got paid up front, especially since he's been pretty skeptical about this whole deal. He admits that when he first heard they were going to be working for the Empire, he never expected them to actually play fair with the money or treat them like actual partners. He tells Athos straight up that he figured the Empire would just use the tribe as cannon fodder and toss them aside once the job was done. But the situation is bigger than just their tribe. The current ruler, Goldius III, is basically obsessed with fighting and has already picked battles with every single country nearby. The Imperial General knows that even if they win land and slaves, there's always a shortage of good soldiers. So Athos explains that while the tribe lost the war, the Empire still needs them as mercenaries. He tells Gaia that if they find any kind of advantage, they have to use it as leverage during negotiations. Gaia is impressed and tells Athos he's honestly amazing for thinking like that. Athos just laughs it off, getting a bit embarrassed and says Gaia is going to make him blush if he keeps the compliments coming. Just then, a tribal warrior stops by and tells Gaia he should check out the new weapons since he trashed his old sword in the last fight. Gaia agrees, heading over to the gear stash. The guys there are still talking about his crazy stunt, with one warrior saying it's wild that he actually challenged a bloody bear. They're all pretty hyped about it, and as Gaia picks up a blade, the warrior tells him he's got a good eye for picking out the right gear. Gaia takes a closer look at the weapon, realizing something about it. He was confused at first, but looking at the quality, he starts to think he was right all along. Gaia takes a good look at the sword in his hand and realizes something pretty disappointing. The tribe is using copper or maybe bronze for their gear, making him think about how bronze is just like a Japanese 10-yen coin. It's basically just copper mixed with tin, which is easy to polish and won't rust. But even if it's easy to work with and stays clean, it's not exactly top-tier material for a war. Gaia knows that when you're talking about actual weapons, bronze is totally inferior to iron. He looks pretty stressed about it because iron is the dangerous stuff that actually changes how wars are fought. It makes a world of difference in a real fight, and Gaia remembers seeing the Imperial soldiers' equipment. It's clear that iron is being traded around in this world. The problem is that none of it ever makes its way to the tribe. He hears the guys talking about how there's just no demand for it out here. But Gaia knows the real reason. It's just way too expensive for them to afford. He closes his eyes, thinking about how the only reason his blade couldn't get through that bloody bear's hide was because the weapon itself was the problem. He looks at the sword again and asks if they'd actually be able to buy real iron weapons if they managed to bring in enough money for the tribe. Uncle Athos tracks Gaia down and lets him know he's been thinking about a new plan for the upcoming war. And Gaia looks up from his sword, a bit surprised to hear Athos has a suggestion. The older man just scratches his head and starts explaining that this whole conflict is actually way bigger than he first thought. He's worried that if their tribe tries to handle it alone, they're probably going to fail. So he decides the best move is to call in some favors and get the neighboring tribes to help them out this time around. A huge mix of warriors from different tribes all show up together. Gaia is standing there with his mouth hanging open, totally blown away by the scale of the gathering, while Athos just stands behind him looking proud. Athos starts pointing them out, mentioning that the Anglo and Bandar tribes showed up, and even the Great Lizard tribe made it out to help. Seeing all these different groups in one place is pretty rare, and someone mentions it's been a long time since they've seen this many tribes together. Gaia tells his uncle he can't believe he actually pulled this off, but Athos just shrugs it off, saying that at the end of the day, everyone just wants a payday. Since the Bluemont tribe is the one running the show this time, Athos tells Gaia he needs to step up and give everyone a proper greeting. Gaia pumps his fist and tells Uncle Athos he's ready to take on this big role and give it everything he's got. And after chatting with the guys for a bit, he happens to spot a new face in the crowd that catches his eye. It's an elf woman with a bow on her back, and she's looking pretty intense as she stands there. Gaia can't help but stare, thinking to himself that she is actually super pretty, but then she looks right at him and says something in a language he's never heard before, leaving him sweating and just standing there while she keeps talking, though none of the words make any sense to him at all. He tries to stumble through a greeting, but he's panicking internally because he can't understand a single word she's saying. Suddenly, he grabs his head and yells out in pain, which definitely catches the elf woman off guard. He realizes the elven language is being downloaded directly into his brain, remembering that the gods promised he wouldn't have any communication issues, and even though he complains to the god about how much the process hurts, the old man just tells him he'll have to deal with it. The elf woman looks down at Gaia and asks if he's doing all right, and Gaia quickly snaps out of it, telling her he's totally fine and sorry for worrying her. She looks completely shocked as she realizes she can actually understand his words now. Before they can keep talking, a loud voice from behind calls out to them. A massive lizard man stands over them and asks where he can find Gaia, which catches Gaia's attention as the guy introduces himself as Rosso, the Great Lizard Tribe chief. He explains he's there to find the Bluemont leader to say hello. So Gaia speaks up and tells Rosso that he's actually the guy he's looking for. Rosso shakes his hand and says it's nice to meet him while Gaia says the same, but the lizard chief just stares him down, saying he's pretty small and wouldn't even be worth eating. Rosso gets right in the kid's face, making Gaia panic and beg him not to eat him since he's still growing, and the big guy just starts cracking up, telling Gaia he's only messing with him while Gaia stands there looking completely drained. The elf woman watches the whole thing with her eyes closed, calling the whole talk a stupid conversation, but Rosso actually agrees with her, looking her over and noting that she's an elf. He starts talking trash, saying how elves can't even speak the barbar language and mentions how they never trade with any other tribes, so you never really know what's going on in their heads. The woman finally introduces herself as Jessica, the niece of the elf chief, and snaps back that they can speak the language just fine. They just don't want to. She gives Rosso a sharp look, telling him she doesn't want to hear about trading habits from a great lizard. Rosso is actually shocked she's talking to him and tells her to stop acting so pretentious. So Jessica just looks away, arguing she's not being pretentious. She just thinks her own language sounds better and more beautiful. Rosso just throws his head back and yells that he doesn't get it at all. The guy is totally lost, and Gaia just watches him with a drop of sweat on his face, thinking he honestly saw this coming from the start. He looks around at the massive crowd of lizards, elves, and humans all mixed together, realizing what a random group they've actually put together. But Uncle Athos interrupts his thoughts, calling out to Gaia that the whole crew is finally ready to hit the road. Gaia is caught off guard by how fast things are moving and mentions he hasn't even finished introducing himself to everyone. So Athos just smiles and tells him there's going to be more than enough time for talking while they're marching toward the fight. One of the warriors reminds him it's a long trek, while another tells Gaia not to get burned out too early since he's the new chief. The campsite is a total mess of people packing gear. Men are shouting to get moving and double-checking if they have all their supplies. Gaia's expression turns serious as the weight of the situation finally sinks in. They are officially heading straight for a battlefield, and as he starts walking with the rest of the army, he realizes this is going to be his first real taste of war. The group keeps moving along the mountain trail, following the stream as they head deeper into the valley, and Gaia gets right in Jessica's space, asking her if she was really the one who caused that big explosion earlier. He looks totally shocked and asks her if elves are actually capable of using magic. So Jessica gives a nervous nod and confirms it, while Gaia grabs her hands, completely obsessed with the idea. She explains that it's not just an elf thing and that the Empire definitely has their own magic-using soldiers too. Gaia starts nerding out, asking how many people can use it and if there's a limit to how many spells they can cast. Jessica tries to get him to back off for a second, but he just keeps going and asks what the range is like. She tells him she doesn't have all the technical answers, but her uncle would probably know the details. Also, Gaia gets a wild look in his eyes and tells her they need to go find him and ask right away. Jessica looks completely drained by his energy, while the other elf woman just watches them and wonders what his deal is. The elven tribe chief, Eliniev, looks Gaia over and asks if he's really the one who wants to know about their magic soldiers. He seems a bit skeptical and asks if Gaia is really the guy from the barbarian tribe, making Gaia jump a bit and quickly confirm it, while Jessica just stands in the back looking pretty bored with the whole thing. Eliniev doesn't look impressed and tells him that how they fight isn't his business, then asks what he even wants with that info. Gaia takes a second and decides to just be totally honest about what he's thinking. He leans in and tells the chief that for this upcoming fight, they actually want the elves to team up with them. He admits they don't have a perfectly detailed strategy yet, but they've at least got a solid idea of what to do. Gaia keeps going, explaining that his tribe just doesn't have enough power to handle this on their own, and he knows it's usually the custom for every tribe to just fight however they want, so he's not trying to force anyone. Eliniev raises a hand to stop him, but Gaia pushes through and says that if the plan works, it'll be a win for the elves too. Eliniev holds up a hand to get everyone's attention and tells Gaia that before anything else, he needs to hear what this plan is. He mentions he already heard about the little scrap from earlier from Jessica and the others, while Jessica just stands there looking pretty annoyed about the whole thing. Eliniev looks at him more seriously, noting that Gaia actually went through the trouble of speaking their language and even called them comrades, which matters because the elven way is to always return respect with respect. Gaia looks pretty hopeful and asks if that means they're actually willing to team up and help them out. Eliniev points out that it'll depend on the terms, but they're mercenaries who showed up to this war to get paid. Gaia just smiles back and promises that he won't let them take a loss on this deal. The chief takes the offer and says they'll be looking forward to seeing what he's got planned. Gaia winks and gives a casual wave as he leaves, which just leaves Jessica standing there looking completely confused by him. Birds fly over the rough mountains of Pyros as the Empire prepares to show everyone exactly how strong they are. The Imperial Army marches out in massive numbers, claiming they're there to bring the great Empire's rule, and they make it clear they're doing all of this in the name of their Emperor. The soldiers get into position, lining up their shields and spears as the heat of battle gets closer. The commander looks over his men, calling them loyal warriors and asking the god of war for protection. Then he screams for everyone to advance while the war horns start blowing all across the field. The front line locks their heavy shields together to make a solid wall. But then the commander yells for them to brace as a huge wave of arrows starts raining down. He orders the magic soldiers to throw up a barrier and tells his own archers to get ready and open fire. Arrows slam into the shields and the magic wall, causing explosions of energy while the troops try to hold. And right then, a lizard-man warrior lets out a massive roar that echoes over the whole battlefield. The battlefield turns into total chaos as blood sprays everywhere. Everyone is yelling that the war has finally started. Rosso leads the charge for the big lizard tribe, shouting for his warriors to move out and get into the fight. The other tribal warriors follow his lead, pumped up and talking about making some serious money from this battle. While the tribes rush forward with their weapons raised, a woman stays back looking pretty worried about the whole situation. The blonde guy next to her notes that the others are already gone, while she asks Atos if they're really just going to let the other tribes get ahead of them. Uncle Atos doesn't answer her right away and just turns his focus toward Gaia, who tells him that it's totally fine and he's ready to handle whatever is coming next. With a determined look on his face, Gaia tells the rest of his group that it's time for them to join the fight too. Yet the Imperial soldiers on the front line stop in their tracks, pointing out something strange happening on the field. They watch Gaia and his group sprint past, completely confused about where those guys are even trying to go. The Imperial soldiers are completely baffled, shouting that the enemy isn't even in that direction and asking if those guys even know how a battlefield works, while Rosso watches them go, just brushing it off by saying that's exactly why they're nothing but barbarians. As they run, Uncle Athos sounds pretty worried and asks Gaia if he's actually sure about this, since they're clearly moving away from the main fight. He also points out that the elves are following them for some reason, but Gaia doesn't seem to mind at all, telling everyone it's totally fine and explaining that if they flank from this side, they can get an advantage. Gaia shouts that they're going to get close to the enemy, which leaves the rest of the group trailing behind him feeling pretty confused. He reveals his real plan is to go after the Kingdom Army's commander and take that guy's head before anyone else can. The guys following him can barely get their words out. He's just stuttering in shock at how crazy the plan sounds, asking how he could possibly know where the commander even is, but Gaia just confidently tells them that he can tell exactly where to go. With a bit of a smirk, Gaia starts to explain that for him, it's just something that's hard to put into words. Gaia looks over his tactical display, feeling like he's got a literal God's eye view of the entire battlefield, while on the other side, the enemy soldiers are starting to panic, screaming about magic and wondering what's wrong with their barrier. One of the guys tries to keep it together, figuring they just had bad luck and the enemy accidentally hit a gap in their defense. He tells himself to stay calm because there's no way a lucky shot like that is going to happen again. But right then, another massive blast of energy slams into their lines and wrecks everything. The soldier is totally losing it now, shouting and trying to figure out what the hell is even going on. Back with the group, one of the guys is shocked that they actually landed another hit, while Gaia calls out a new target on the right and tells Alaniev to take it, leaving Jessica standing there in total shock that he's actually landing these crazy shots one after another. Looking out at the smoke-covered field, she realizes it shouldn't even be possible to see the barrier gaps from this far away. But as she watches Gaia, it really looks like he can see every single thing happening out there. Gaia sees the path is finally clear and tells the group to go straight for the enemy commander's head. One of the tribal warriors takes the lead, screaming for the mercenary squad to start their charge. Everyone starts rushing forward, yelling at each other to keep moving as they close the distance. Blood is flying everywhere as the two sides clash, but the tribesmen keep shouting to push through the line. Up on his horse, one of the Imperial soldiers is trying to keep his guys from panicking, telling them not to be scared of some simple foot soldiers. But then Rosso the lizardman shows up, telling the rider to get down there so they can have a little fun together. Uncle Athos keeps the pressure on, yelling for the squad to keep moving because the commander is hidden deeper in the back, while another soldier looks around the battlefield, frustrated because he still hasn't found the guy he's looking for. Seeing things fall apart, he calls for a retreat, always telling everyone to pull back and get back together elsewhere. But right then, Gaia catches sight of him and smiles, knowing he finally found his target. Gaia gets this wild look in his eyes and a creepy smile. He's totally locked in, saying the commander is his prey. The soldier starts calling for a retreat, but he's too late because Gaia is already mid-air. Swinging his sword down so fast the guy can barely react. The hit connects hard, and just like that, the commander gets knocked right off his horse as blood sprays across the grass. Standing over him, Gaia yells out that he's from the Bluemont mercenary squad. He's calling out General Pausania of the Algaeus Kingdom by name. The general loses it and screams that he's going to take Gaia's head, but Gaia just glares back and says that'll only happen over his dead body. Before the general can even move, Rosso the lizardman jumps into the middle of it, hitting the guy with enough force to shut him up. Gaia is actually a little surprised to see him there, just watching as the big lizardman takes over the fight. Rosso looks back with a mean glint in his eye, asking if this is the head Gaia wants, then tells him to just go ahead and take it. The general is absolutely fuming at this point, looking down at them and calling them nothing but trashy infantry scum. He tries to swing his blade one more time to end it, but Gaia is already rushing forward to finish what he started. Gaia looks at the distance between them and realizes the reach is just too different, thinking they'll never get close at this rate. So he decides that if he can't reach the guy normally, he's just going to have to dive straight in, regardless of the risk, and just like that, he lunges forward. The general's spear goes right through his chest, but Gaia doesn't even flinch as the general laughs and calls him a complete fool for charging in without thinking about the consequences. Yet he just keeps mocking him, saying there's no way Gaia's short sword could ever reach him from that far away, while Gaia just hangs there, bleeding out and holding onto the spear. The general starts to freak out, asking the brat if he's actually trying to take them both down at once, but Gaia just looks up and says, "That's not it," even offering a small apology before he makes his move, because with a cold look in his eyes, He tells the general that the only person dying today is him. Rosso sees the whole thing and loses it, screaming Gaia's name and asking if he's even okay after getting stabbed like that. Rosso yells at Gaia that he's definitely not dying from a wound like that. Gaia just holds his bloody chest and says he's fine, though he admits being able to talk just means he's still breathing. Looking down at the body on the ground, Gaia asks for confirmation that the guy was really the commander. Rosso says yeah, and Gaia just looks at the corpse and says good. Now Rosso turns to the battlefield and shouts at the top of his lungs that General Pausania of the Algiers Kingdom has been taken down, making sure everyone hears. Uncle Athos joins in, announcing to the whole field that Gaia from the Barbarian mercenary squad is the one who killed him while the other soldiers start losing it, screaming Gaia's name and asking if he really managed to pull off something that crazy. Jessica just stands there in total shock. Staring at Gaia, she says it's completely unbelievable that he actually did what he said he would. The enemy cavalry are fuming, with one guy saying it's a total disgrace to be shamed like this by a bunch of random foot soldiers, and he starts panicking about how they're supposed to face the crown prince after a loss like this. So the enemy officer snaps and orders his men to kill every last one of them. He screams that Gaia can't be allowed to leave the field alive. Athos sees the enemy closing in and yells for everyone to retreat before they get surrounded, telling them to head straight for the forest. The Imperial cavalry suddenly charges through the line, catching everyone off guard and tearing across the battlefield as the sound of galloping horses fills the air, and soldiers on the ground start yelling out that the Imperial cavalry is finally here to help. One guy admits he has no idea what just happened, but it definitely saved their lives. So he tells everyone to just keep moving and follow the horses. The mounted soldiers keep pushing ahead, and leaving the foot soldiers to scramble behind them as the Imperial troops address the group as the Barbarian mercenary squad, and Gaia just stands there looking confused. An officer looks back and says he appreciates all the work they've put in today. He shouts back over his shoulder to make sure the reward for their help is actually worth it, while everyone looks out at the mountains as the leader asks if they're ready to get moving again. Since Jessica complains that the Imperial army really likes to overwork people, already ordering them to head straight to the next fight. The men are all in high spirits, with one guy saying it doesn't matter where they go since they're only there for the money, and his buddy totally agrees. As they start packing up, one of the veterans tells everyone to make sure they don't leave a single thing behind. Uncle Athos explains to Gaia that this whole fight was just one part of a bigger attack on multiple fronts. He thinks if they move fast, they can make it in time to back up the other units. But he stops to think for a second, on realizing that the other front might actually be where the real heavy fighting is happening. The next big target is Colon Castle, a massive fortress built right on the cliffs that serves as the main defense for the southern kingdom. The siege is already in full swing, with soldiers desperately throwing up ladders to scale the giant stone walls. Things are getting messy at the base of the tower. Someone screams as they lose their footing, while the guys below yell at everyone to watch out for falling debris. As the sun starts to dip, the commander realizes they aren't getting through today and shouts for everyone to fall back immediately. The fighting finally dies down for the day, leaving the castle standing tall against the evening sky while the army settles into their camp for the night, with soldiers exhausted and moving slowly between the rows of tents. Inside the camp, a merchant holds up a cup and tries to sell a cheap drink to a passing soldier. Gaia and Uncle Athos walk through the rows of tents, taking in the lively scene around them. Gaia looks over at the groups of men sitting around tables and drinking, mentioning to his uncle how the whole vibe is completely different from what they saw at Pyros. He even asks if this is actually a military camp, since everyone seems so relaxed. Uncle Athos thinks about it and explains that it's pretty normal for merchants to follow an army to make some money once a war starts. Gaia realizes that the fighting in Pyros probably just ended too fast for any of those guys to show up and set up shop. Even with that explanation, Athos can't help but feel a bit uneasy as he watches the soldiers partying in the background. He decides they should just keep moving toward the main camp to report their arrival, and they eventually reach a set of wooden gates guarded by two soldiers holding long spears. The guards don't look friendly at all, with one grunting while the other notes that the barbarian mercenaries have finally shown up. The guard at the gate looks them over and asks if they really made it all the way from Pyros already. Surprised at how fast they moved, he figures the fighting over there must have been a total breeze if they're standing here now. Gaia doesn't really react to the comment and just tells the guy they're here to see the commanding officer, but the guard just shrugs it off with a whatever and tells them to follow him. As they walk deeper into the camp, the sound of soldiers drinking and laughing is everywhere. Gaia starts getting a weird feeling, thinking to himself that it's more than just the rowdy atmosphere, like something is totally off. The guard stops in front of a large tent and tells them they've arrived, giving them a quick warning to watch their tone and not be rude once they're inside. Stepping in, Gaia is immediately hit by a strange scent, wondering why the place smells like flowers or some kind of perfume. Suddenly, he bumps right into a woman in a fancy dress, catching them both off guard as they nearly trip. The woman catches her breath and tells him to be more careful, while another lady sits in the background just watching the whole thing play out. The women inside notice Gaia immediately, with one pointing out how young he looks while the other wonders if a kid like him is actually a soldier. All while Gaia stands there in total shock as the attendant announces their arrival to a man sitting comfortably with girls on both sides. He just looks up and asks about these visitors, since Crown Prince Muno of the Veritakuras Empire doesn't remember inviting anyone today. Gaia starts sweating the moment he sees the guy's face, because it's a look he knows all too well. It hits him that this is the exact same man he encountered before his life changed, and while Gaia is reeling, Uncle Atos steps up to introduce them as the Barbarian Mercenary Corps from Pyros, explaining they only came by to pay their respects to the prince, but Muno doesn't seem interested in the gesture at all. Without saying a word, the prince just chucks his heavy metal cup right at Atos's face, catching him completely off guard. Gaia screams out for his uncle while the prince just sighs, complaining about how much of a nuisance these barbarians are. Prince Muno doesn't even look at them, just asking if they can't tell he's busy taking a rest. He looks completely annoyed as he tells them to stop bothering him with these pointless reports. Muno goes on about how he doesn't need backup from a bunch of barbarians, complaining that Hevicius is always getting involved in things that aren't his business. Clearly the guy has no tact. The prince snaps his fingers and calls someone an idiot, on yelling for the guards to toss the filthy barbarians out right now. Gaia looks like he's ready to kill the guy, but Atos grabs him and tells him to stop, saying they did what they came for and it's time to leave. Once they're outside among the tents, Atos asks the attendant where the mercenaries are supposed to deploy, but the guy just looks confused and scratches his head, admitting he doesn't really have an answer. He just tells them to find any empty patch of dirt and set up their camp there. Gaia looks pretty drained, just repeating the guy's words about finding any random spot, but the attendant just waves it off, saying there's no rush since Kolan Castle is already surrounded. He explains they just need to keep up a steady pace with the attack, and eventually the soldiers inside will give up. So Atos takes a look out at the water near the cliffside castle. Suddenly he looks confused and asks if they're really sending a ship out this late, which totally catches the attendant off guard. He says he wasn't told about any ships and suggests Atos just saw it wrong. Atos stands there thinking about it, wondering if his eyes were actually playing tricks on him. The attendant keeps going, saying that while he doesn't know much about what the merchants are doing, nobody would be dumb enough to send a ship out into the dark without any lights on it. He admits he's not exactly an expert on how things work on a battlefield, but something definitely feels off. Gaia is pretty annoyed with the whole situation, complaining that the camp is way too relaxed for its own good. He looks over at the crown prince of the Veritakuras Empire partying with women and wonders if a guy like that can even lead an army. Gaia thinks for a second that maybe the prince is just acting like a fool to hide his actual skills, but he quickly realizes that's probably not it. He really doesn't want to follow orders from a guy like that. But he tells himself it's just part of the job. Atos pulls Gaia aside with a serious look, asking him if he happened to see a ship while they were heading over. Gaia stops to think about the ship, admitting that he actually thought he caught a glimpse of one too. He mentions he didn't notice it with his own eyes at first, but it might have popped up on his smartphone map. Atos gets even more serious, bringing up the battle currently going on at Kolan Castle, and he looks really worried while telling Gaia he thinks the Imperial army might actually lose this fight, which completely shocks Gaia, who looks out at the cliffside castle and asks him why he'd think something like that. Gaia walks through the camp looking at the disorganized stalls and lazy soldiers. He thinks to himself that even though he saw it coming, the situation on this battlefield looks completely hopeless. Jessica overhears his talk about spies and gets pretty worked up about it. She can't believe the talk she's hearing about how the Imperial army is destined to lose this entire battle. She goes on about how they're supposedly ready to retreat at any moment. She looks at Gaia and asks if the people saying this were actually being serious. Moving on, Gaia circles back to his conversation with Atos. He brings up the idea of the army losing and asks his uncle why he's so sure about it. Atos looks pretty stressed while explaining that he spotted a ship. It was heading right for Kolan Castle in the middle of the night. He explains that he originally thought it might be one of their own Imperial ships, but the prince is such a useless idiot that he didn't have a single clue what was happening. So Atos realizes there's no logical reason for the Empire to have a ship out that late, unless there's something much bigger going on. Gaia catches on to what his uncle is hinting at. He looks over with a worried expression and asks if he's thinking what Gaia is thinking. He says it out loud, suggesting that the mystery ship might actually be a supply vessel sent from the Algis kingdom to help the enemy.